Previously on the business.
Right, let's make our way off to London now. Good morning to you, Joe Mellor. How are you, sir?
I'm not too bad at all. Yourself?
Yeah, we're super good, thank you. We really, really are. How is everybody dealing with the news that President Obama finally managed to get rid of a little bit of a problem that was looming over Washington's head?
It looks like the world's saved, so there's no problem anymore. So, I think the biggest story is I've got a sexy voice allegedly, so that's the big story for the day.
I deny all of those claims.
That's all that matters today, Chris. But yeah, it seems. I mean, on a normal point, it seems at the last minute the Republicans came good against their will, and it seems like they didn't really get anything. A slight saving on the subsidies for people applying for the care, but apart from that, the Democrats seem to win. So the only problem is that the ceiling's only until February the 7th. So we might be having the same conversation again, hopefully on your radio station, in a couple of months' time, which is a worry. And you could see it go through the whole rigmarole again. I think America is the biggest economy, needs to sort of book its ideas up a little bit. We can't be expected to kind of sit there every few months worrying whether they're going to pass a law to pay their debts. So I think the long term something needs to be sorted out their end, to be honest, because there's nothing me or you can do about it, really.
Joe, what happens if they don't sort out their debt? If they do default, let's say that last night was a complete nightmare, nothing happened, and we woke up this morning, all of us going, this hasn't been signed. Okay, so now what? You know, we've all been told that, this is the deadline and this is a big problem. But what actually is the problem for the rest of the world?
Well, if it does happen, then obviously it's the biggest economy. They might have problems sort of borrowing debt and borrowing themselves. For instance, Fitch were looking to downgrade their credit rating from a AAA probably to a AA, which would have been a big worry as well. There would have been interest rate problems, which would have ramificated through the world, and basically it would just cause a lot of troubles. But defaulting itself isn't really a problem. It can recover from that. But I think to have the biggest economy in the world not be able to pay its debts, I mean, in theory it can. It's just a minor argument between two political parties. So it's not like they've run out of money. The money they can find. But I still think it would send shockwaves across the world, which would cause a lot of trouble for England and South Africa as well.
Joe, with the new deadlines that have now been put into place with January the 15th and February the 7th, as well as the midterm elections that are coming up, how is all of this and the deadlines going to affect those elections?
Oh, well, basically, I mean, if you're a betting man or woman, I'd bet on Obama to get back in as a president second term. The Republicans are totally split now. The ones who didn't back down yesterday now think that the Republicans who did vote with the Democrats are kind of pretty much communists. Do you know what I mean? So that's the way they think. So the Republican Party is going to, it might even split to two parties, you don't know. So I think the Democrats have got a pretty easy ride. I mean, they haven't come out of it that well, because obviously why can't they get to a decision in good time? So they do look weakened, but nowhere near as much as the Republican Party, I don't think. So I think there's midterm elections next year, I think, and I can imagine the Democrats will do very well.
I'd like to talk about China for a second, because it's something that I just learned a few minutes ago on the show about the fact that China is sitting on a lot of America's debt. And of course, we all know the involvement and the sentiment between the US and China. We also, in South Africa, are very heavily involved with the Chinese. They're obviously doing a lot in Africa at the moment. In fact, around the world, really, if you look at it that way. How does that affect things, Joe?
Also, Japan bought up quite a lot of dollars as well, because obviously they compete with China. Obviously, they're not exactly the best of friends. So they've bought up a lot of dollars, not as many as China. So the problem with the reserve is, obviously, currency reserve, it's good to get as many dollars as possible. But this is another argument, because China and Russia were saying that they shouldn't have a currency reserve based on paper currencies. It's just a government debt currency. So what they are saying is they should look for another type of currency which isn't attached to a country and use that. So they might use this as leverage to say, well, look what happened last time. We can't be, well, the Americans can't be trusted. So why don't we look at new forms of exchange? I mean, there's also Bitcoin, which has been, I don't know if you know much about it, which is kind of like a virtual currency.
Right.
So, I mean, obviously that might not work, but in theory, something like that could take over the dollar as the main form of exchange, which would leave America sort of its power base gone. And with China on the rise as well, then you'd think that America would be on the slide. So it would be worrying for them. So that could possibly happen. I mean, China, Russia, India, Brazil, and Venezuela all trade in their own currencies with each other, dollars, but oil is still traded in US dollars. So I think it's when oil is traded not in dollars anymore, that's when the dollar might fall out. But obviously oil isn't at the moment.
How's the announcement from last night? How's it affected the markets in the UK? What's it looking like there?
Well, weirdly, I had a quick look at the markets, and obviously the Nasdaq and the Dow Jones are up quite a bit. But for the last time I checked, all the European markets were down. So that's not very good news. But I mean, they might rally a little bit, but they were down not significantly, but down a little bit. Maybe again the markets are a bit worn out with it all, and it's just it's kind of, well, it's sorted, but it's putting a hole in the leak, because obviously by February they're going to do it again. So it's not really over yet, you see. So maybe the markets haven't rallied as much as I thought they might, to be honest.
I think you've got a massive problem because there's nothing left to write about, Joe. After this, it's pretty much vanilla from here on forward.
Yeah, I think you're right. I might start writing about. I might just start South African stuff. Rihanna didn't do enough costume changes in Japan.
Oh, that reached you as well, did it? That reached you as well. Good.
Well, I noticed it. So, I mean, that's a big story in South Africa. Rihanna, book your ideas up.
Joe, just so we can get hold of you and people can follow you on Twitter, because you're a very interesting guy, and I know that there's some superb stuff up on the website. Just give us all your details again, won't you, please?
Yeah, it's the website's www.thelondoneconomic.com, which is the main website. My Twitter is best to get me on @the Joe Mellor, spelled JoeMellor. If you have any stories out there you want to pass over, you can submit stories, and I'll give them a good go. And if I think they could work, they would. So if any of your listeners would be interested, I'm more than happy to do something on an African story. I'm actually thinking about writing an African story anyway, because I think obviously we've been chatting, there's a lot to write about.
Yeah.
That might be my next project.
There is loads, mate. Don't be a stranger, because we're always here to help wherever we can. So give us a shout if you need to. You're an absolute legend for giving us a bit of insight into the UK this morning, and also into a bit of the background with China, etc. Thank you for your time again, Joe.
No problem at all. Have a great day, you two. Thanks very much.
Okay, bye.
Take care, Joe. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
There you go. That is Joe Mellor from the London Economic. Shame his line broke up as he said his website. It is www.thelondoneconomic.com.
Yeah.
I beg your pardon. So thelondoneconomic.com, and you can follow him on @the Joe Mellor. That is Mellor.
I'm glad that you got my secret voice crash out to him. Thanks.
The Business. Weekdays 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. on balls.co.za. Brought to you by FNB Business Banking.